So taking a look at our brand new unit here, it's going to be on logic or logical reasoning, which you may have noticed by the cover of your booklet. If you have your booklet already, if you don't have your booklet, then I guess you're just going to have to understand that it's logical reasoning. The purpose of this unit is not just to say, are you a logical thinker or are you not? Because there's a lot of different perceptions on if you are able to think logically or not. Logical thinking can be a process actually that we go through as well. And so this unit is looking at the process of thinking through things logically, thinking through things kind of one step at a time and going through each step one by one before solving for it. We're going to start off our unit on logical reasoning by looking at solving logical puzzles or solving logic puzzles. And I have three different puzzles that we're going to take a look at. The first type are logic puzzles, which is a very fitting name for the unit that we have. We're also going to take a look at Sudokus, as well as something called a Kenken or a Calcudoku. These are three different types of puzzles that we're going to take a look at, and we're going to just kind of work through solving them and try to figure out a way of solving each one of them. And I'm going to go through step by step each one of those processes. So we're going to take a look at logic puzzles. Logic puzzles look something like this. This is a very simple one. It's a kind of just a simple box, a simple matrix that we're going to take a look at. And we're going to look at how do we solve something like that. So what you're going to be given is a matrix. A matrix just means a grid which will be filled in with, well, check marks and X's in this case here. So inside this matrix, we're going to place a check mark for any clue that's giving a definitive response. So if we know based on the clues that we're given that something is correct or something is in fact yes, we'll put a check mark in there. If anything else in that same row will not be correct, so if we're told that something does not work, we're going to place an X into there. Okay. And then we're going to put answers into a chart right below or right underneath our matrix, or it could be right beside, depending on the size of our matrix or the size of our question. So all the clues there's going to be a bunch of clues that are given. All of them give some information. It may not be useful till other information is determined. It might be very straightforward that yes, this is the fact, or no, this is not a fact. And so we're given a bunch of clues, and each one of them provides some information. Some are going to be used later on. Some are going to be associated with us later on. Some are very definitive on what we know. Now, deduction, okay, a way of thinking, often involves determining what can't be true. Okay, so if something can't be true, then we're going to put an X in there. And so we're going to understand that it's in fact not true. And if all of the possibilities have been exhausted except for one, so if none of them are true except for one, then we have proven that that one must be true. Okay, so proving something is true can be also based on understanding what is not true about that certain thing. So an example here, let's say Carl's name must start with Carl's last name must start with either A, B, C, or D. If Carl's last name can't start with A, B, C, or D, then we know that it must start with D. Okay, sometimes we have to learn what something is, we need to figure out what it isn't. So let's take a look at an example. We'll have another example on the next page, which that we'll do as well. So let's look here. We have Karen. So here's an example of a logic puzzle. Karen, Derek, Faye, Tanya, and Scott each have a different favorite flower. Which child goes with each flower? So our matrix here has our first names on one side and our flowers on the other side. And each one of these squares is associated with a certain first name and a certain flower. Now, if something is true, we'll put a check mark in it. If something is not true, we'll put an X in it. And then we can hopefully figure out which in fact are the true ones and which in fact are the wrong ones. Now, something about these logic puzzles is that every single one of, each row and column can only have one check mark. Okay, so if Karen likes the tulips, she will not have a favorite rose, daisy, violet, or carnation. Okay, thus Derek, Faye, Tanya, and Scott will not have tulips as their favorite. They must have a different one. That's how we can use reasoning to solve our questions. So let's look at our clues here. The first one is that Tanya is allergic to, and so doesn't like, carnations. Well, we know then that Tanya will not have carnations as her favorite flower, and so we'll X that off, meaning that there's only 4 more options for her favorite flower. Karen's favorite is not the tulip, so we are going to X that off as well. Okay, so we know that Karen's is not the tulip, so that means one of the other four must like the tulip as their favorite. Derek hates tulips and roses, so with Derek, we're going to put an X through tulips and roses. Now, it means that he likes daisies, violets, and carnations, but one of those three will be his favorite, and so with that one, we will then put a check mark, but we don't know so far. Faye likes violets, so with Faye, we're going to, based on what we're told, we're going to assume that she likes violets. Okay, and actually we can just check mark off those right now. Faye likes violets. So if Faye likes violets, that means that nobody else has the violet as their favorite, and we know that Faye does not have any of the other flowers as her favorite. This is going to be her favorite. And we can put this down here. Faye likes violets. Okay, and maybe you don't want to write these down quite yet on the bottom because, well, we might have to switch it around yet, but for right now, we can just, we'll put that in there at this point. Last one there says that Scott likes the flowers that Tanya is allergic to. So Scott, remember we were told that Tanya was allergic to carnations, so Scott must like carnations, and thus not the other ones. And carnations can't go with anybody else. Now you'll notice that we've come to the end of our clues, okay? And we still have a bunch of things that we aren't totally sure about. We know two of the children's flowers, but we don't know the other three. If we take a look through this here, we can see that Derek, the only one that he is not, or does not dislike, or the only one that he is not associated with at this point is the daisy. And so therefore Derek must be with the daisy. And on using that same logic, we can see that Karen her favorite must be the rose, and for Tanya, her favorite must be the tulip. So once we know each one of them, we're going to put them into our solution box right here. Derek with the daisy. Faye we already have. Tanya is the tulip. And Scott is the carnation. This gives us a list of clues which we then solve using logical reasoning. This is logic here, and then come up with our answers based on those clues. So let's take a look at a second one here, and this one's called the artists. Okay, so again, we just have a simple 4x4 matrix. We have 4 first names and 4 mediums. Well, here's our statement. Mark, Meg, Melissa, and Marcy, all M's, are all artists that like to use a different medium, which means a different way of creating their art. Okay, each using one felt pens, black pencils, paint, and crayons. Now we want to try to figure out which of them is, which of the people represents each of the mediums. So our clues are right here. We're told that Melissa loves to use bright colors, but doesn't like felt pens. So I'm just going to stroke that one off there. Melissa right here likes to use bright colors. Well, black pencils do not have bright colors, okay? And felt pens, they say that she does not like. So we're going to X off those two right there. I'm going to use different colors in this case here. It just so happens to be an art one, just to represent each of our different clues. It says that Marcy and Melissa hate the mess paint makes. So that means that Marcy and Melissa will not like paint. And that just gives us a little, that's another clue there, and we'll check that off. So based on that clue, we know that Melissa must like crayons. And thus, the other three will not like crayons, or is not their favorite medium. So that is our second clue, and we already have a solution to that. Mark takes excellent care of his brushes. Well, felt pens, black pencils, and paint, only one of them uses brushes. So we have to think through things logically, and we have to think from kind of our past experience, which one uses brushes? And that is in fact paint. So this one tells us straightforward that Mark likes paint. Okay, and the other ones, again, will not. All right, next step, Meg thinks using only black is boring. Well, felt pens have color and black has just black pencils. So in other words, Meg must not like black pencils and will therefore like felt pens. Okay. And using deduction, we know that Marcy will not like felt pens as well, and thus Marcy must like black pens or black pencils. Sorry about the announcement there. That's what happens sometimes when you're recording during school hours, or even sometimes after school hours. Based on what we see here, we know then that Mark likes paint, that's his medium. Meg likes felt pens. Melissa likes crayons. And Marcy likes black pencils. And that gives us our solution right there. Now, the final one that we're going to take a look at here is much bigger. Okay, this one has a little bit of a bigger matrix. It actually has 3 matrices in here, and this is the size that we're going to get in your assignment or bigger. Okay, here we have. On these first 2, we had 2 different things we were solving for. The first name and, in this case, the medium. And in the previous one, it was the first name and the flower that they really liked. Here we have 3 things that we're trying to solve for. We have the first name, we have the last name, and we also have a homeroom that we're trying to solve for. So in this case here, we have 5 teachers, which have a first name, a last name, and some homeroom that they are associated with. Well, in this case here, we can associate first name with last name and with homeroom. We can also associate our last names with our homeroom as well, and that might give us clues to solving this puzzle. So let's take a look here at our clues, and we have a few extra clues here. The first one is that Kim and Sandy are the only females. Well, that might help us later on. It doesn't actually give us anything, but I'm going to put F and M next to those 5 names because it might help us later on. It doesn't actually help us with anything so far, but it might help us with something later on. Mr. Reimer, okay, oh, here we go. We got our first thing. Mr. Mr. represents a male. So that tells us that Kim and Sandy cannot have the last name Reimer. Okay, all right, so let's just go through this a little more. Didn't get H8, so we know that Reimer is not in H8. Now we don't know over here what that's going to be, and isn't named Tom. So we know Reimer is not Tom. Okay? So Reimer's not Tom. So in other words, the only options we have here are it's Dave Reimer or Bill Reimer. And we'll have to maybe wait and see a little later to see which one it's actually going to end up being. Now Tom didn't get L2. So Tom is not in L2. We know that one. Okay, and that's all it's telling us. Tom did not get L2. All right, next, Ms. Funk got G5. Okay, Ms. Funk got G5. That means that the Funk has to be associated with one of the ladies, either Kim or Sandy. And so Dave, Bill, and Tom are not Funks. And Funk is in G5. So this will be a check mark here. And these will be X's. We're going to have lots of X's in light blue here. That's great. Okay, but we also know that if Ms. Funk got G5, then none of the guys could have gotten G5 as well. So it's associating the male names with G5 as well. We know that none of them. It has to be either Kim or Sandy is going to have G5 as well. All right, neither Sandy Hebert, oh, wait a minute, this tells us her last name. So Sandy is Hebert, okay, and what that means is that these ones are going to be all X'd off. Okay, Sandy Hebert nor Tom got G4. So J4. So Tom did not get J4, Sandy did not get J4, and Hebert did not get J4. Wow, we have now a whole bunch of stuff that we've been able to X off because we found out that Sandy has the last name Hebert, and so that gives us a lot of extra clues. It's also going to tell us that Kim has to be the Funk. Okay. Sorry if that sounded weird. So Kim is Funk, and we know that Funk is in G5, so that one's going to be G5. And that means that all of these other ones get X'd off. Okay. And so we have one of them secured away. We know that Kim is Funk is in G5. Okay, so we got a lot done on that one clue, and that's sometimes the way it comes. They come in big bunches there like that. Finally, Bill, who isn't a Braesky, so Bill is not a Braesky, and we'll X that off there, got H8. So Bill got H8, so that means that these ones get X'd off, and all these get X'd off. Okay, so that also tells us that Braesky did not get H8, so we can put it on there, and here comes another announcement. And so that gives us all of our clues that we've put in there. Now, the rest of our clues we are going to have to kind of come up with based on what we've seen so far. We know that Tom is in C6, okay, so we can X off those. And we don't know anything about C6 here, so we're not sure what Tom's last name is quite yet. Okay. Well, actually here we know that Tom is not a Hebert. Okay, so C6 cannot be Hebert. And we know Tom is not a Reimer, so Reimer cannot be there. So we know that either Penner or Braesky is in C6, and that might help us out a little bit later yet. This one here, we know that Sandy is in L2, and we know that Dave is in J4. All right, all those things we can kind of perceive based on what we know there. Okay, Bill now is in H8, so we know that Bill, who is not a Braesky, so Braesky cannot be H8. Yep, we already have that. And now, so for H8, we have to here we can do a couple more things. Sandy is a Hebert, she's in L2, so we know that Hebert has L2, so this one's going to get a check mark, so that one's going to get X'd off, and this is going to help us solve a little bit more. We know that H8 has to go to the Penner, and we know that J4 has to go to Reimer, and we know that C6 has to go to Braesky. Okay, all those things that we understand based on kind of, again, the clues that we're going through. We know that Tom is in C6, so C6, Tom must be Braesky. We know that Bill is in H8, H8 is Penner, so Bill is Penner, and Dave is Reimer. All right, wow, we've now got all of those together, and now we want to put it all into a chart which tells us the information. So I'm going to start here on top with Kim. Kim, last name Funk, homeroom G5. Okay, so that's Kim. Next one, Sandy Hebert is in L2. Dave Reimer is in J4. Bill Penner is in H8. And Tom Braesky is in C6. Okay, and that would be our final answer, and that would be the conclusion of our logic problem. So solving each one of them, again, going back and forth, will really help us to complete those logic puzzles. Now, for your assignment, okay, you will be required to do at least one, let's say at least 2 logic puzzles. Okay, I've given you a whole bunch of them. Complete at least 2 of them. Try some of the other ones. See if you can solve them as well. If you really enjoy them, it gives you a chance to kind of do some more practice. But complete at least 2 of the logic puzzles that I've given you in the assignment.